it was interesting. Um, Number one, getting to talk to you really added, really made what I've been working on feel so much more substantial. And seeing the priority that you've given it really created a sense of um, um, validation of its importance. So thank you on both accounts. That really is that has really meant a lot to me.
Thank you. You're not working on something small, so it deserves utmost priority for something that big.
Now, I recorded our last call. I sent you a copy of that video for your notes. And I didn't mention it last time. I wanted to let you know that I'm recording it this time. We can delete it if there's anything in it you don't like, but this way, if the notes are there.
I don't mind it. Nothing for me to hide. I'm listening to you.
So you saw what happened. I guess what's it been, 3 weeks since we last talked? So I want to give you a little context of my paranoia on the one side and my, what was that? Delusions of grandeur on the other. And that is that I had worked on building out I first began modeling the RADA mortgage, the mortgage program that will reduce people's monthlies by 50% and reduce the cost by 50%. Back in the late 80s and early 90s with the Japanese real estate collapse. And then I found momentum for taking it off the back shelf, playing with it again when I saw the same thing happen to the Asian tigers. You know, there was a half a dozen countries there. And then again in the late 90s and early 2000s with Mexico. So by the time 2005 came around, I was very familiar with the red flags to the coming real estate implosion. And so I began shopping that around and connected with the credit unions there in DC. And they did the vetting. So they put me in front of their accountant. Well, first, you know, the CEO dragged me over the coals best he could. And it was a little, I'm not sure unnerving is the right word. It just seemed to be concerning that it sounded that, you know, when they say it's too good to be true. So they put me in front of the accountant. That was about an hour and a half, answered all the questions there. Then they put me in front of the attorney, answered the questions there. Then they brought in he was part of the Mortgage Association for credit unions on the East Coast. It's a group. And in that they had the La Raza Bank also, the CEO from La Raza, and gave the presentation to them, answered their questions, and they were excited. It was somewhere between impressed and excited. And I had cautioned them at that meeting, which was Friday. I was like, I've been studying this now for 15 years, and I cannot press the urgency of us acting on this immediately because any day the market's going to collapse. Guess what happened that weekend?
What year was this?
This was 2007.
Well, I can imagine. Yeah, exactly.
Lehman Brothers happened that weekend.
Wow.
So
October 07?
Yeah. So whenever that was. So it was that Friday, and we had an organ. It's called the Foundation of Women Legislators of America, and they have a membership of women legislators at every level of the government throughout the country. And they were really excited about, you know, this being their big coming out of.
You said legislators?
Foundation of Women Legislators.
Okay.
And so they wanted to introduce it to Congress and then introduce it to the rest of the country, and then have La Raza jump in. And I was making inroads to some of the world's biggest banks as well. So when Lehman Brothers collapsed, everything shut down, and it took a year in order. So I literally missed it by, 5 days. So I'm seeing the same telltale signs today, where if we don't get this out on time, once the market implodes, then there's no value, or rather, the greatest value is just before it's getting ready. And based on the signs that I've been seeing, we are there.
How familiar are you with Michael Burry?
Is he the one that did the bets against the market? Yes. So he cleaned up on China.
Big Short.
Yeah, and he's so. I'm assuming you're following the same materials that I am, where everybody says they're just trying to buy themselves days to make it through the election, is the narrative now. So we got cut off at the 15 mark last time. So let me start with the punchline, and then we'll work our way back from there. So the last time we covered the ecosystem, that if we were able to, in fact, reduce mortgages between 30 to 50%, we've just reset the banks. They have no more liability. Wall Street will go through the roof. And the U.S. debt, which has between 10 to $15 trillion worth of real estate securities, or some version of the real estate market, credit default swaps, et cetera, they will be now retired back to the market. So we've just reduced our debt by 50%. We've just reduced people's debt by 50%, because the majority of their debt is in mortgages. And so their monthly payments are also significantly less. Therefore, they have 2 or 3 times more buying power, in addition to a US dollar that is stronger. So that's the ecosystem. Now, the point that I made last time, the RADA mortgage was able to uncover the centerpiece of that ecosystem, because the RADA mortgage reduced the cost so dramatically. Therefore, it played everything out that much more clearly. But there's any number of things that we can do in order to help people with their mortgages, none of them as simply or effectively as the RADA mortgage. It's the only financial product for a depreciating market. Now, it took me about 15 years to develop the template for the RADA mortgage. And then it took me about 10 years after that in order to figure out why it was able to reduce people's mortgages so dramatically. And then it took me an additional 5 years to figure out that all I've done was a auto lease to own applied to the real estate market. So even though there's not a depreciating asset for the real estate market, there's not a financial product for the real estate market. There is one industry that has a financial product for that. It's the auto industry, and it's the auto lease. So I reached out to one of the contacts on the page here, and then he responded, and I wrote out a whole new presentation for him. I showed it to one of my buddies, and then just ended up completely rewriting it. So that should be done probably by this weekend, and it's really good. It makes the corollaries.
Reach out to somebody.
I just can't believe I forgot his name. I think it's either William or Casey. It's been about 3 weeks. I've just been on this.
So I know we have 5 minutes, and I don't like when it cuts off, and then we're like, oh, what do we do from here? So what are the action steps here? What's the ask? What do you want to do from here?
So there's the first action step would be to form RADA as a finance company. I mean, form it as a company, and begin shopping that around. But if we can go through the entire, ecosystem, see all the different companies and industries that are going to be affected for the positive, then to put together companies that would be able to take advantage of those. If we know the banks are going to be doing good, then how do we want to prepare for that? If we know that the U.S. debt is going to be reduced dramatically, so those, for example, are being held by BlackRock and Vanguard. So what does that mean for them in order to be able to move that much U.S. debt, et cetera. So I guess the first step is to form a council to take each one of these parts and build them out into what would be a company or a market positioning to take advantage of those, so that when we do release the information and all of those markets are impacted, we're being able to fully utilize that. So that's the reason why I said I was so excited about having to work with you. You have access to those kinds of players. So that would begin with the RADA mortgage. I'll send that off to you. If you can send me your email, I'll send that to you so you can see that that is the first step that will begin the where we'll rally behind. And then from there, follow how that plays out through the rest of the ecosystem and then additional players and companies for that. Now, I just wanted to get it off to you. I said that the ecosystem that I told you about, that's simply the foundation. So try to understand my level of, I was on top of the world. I was going to be the genius boy wonder that had single-handedly solved the world's entire economic financial crisis. And because that didn't go through, I had spent about $200,000 over that 4-year period putting that whole thing together. It just made me look a little bit on the insane side to my wife and her family. What's that?
In 2007?
Yeah. So I ended up...
like your second act, retribution, already didn't happen in 2007, but here's what I'm ready to do.
So that's the momentum I want you to know I'm bringing to the table. So it's like I've lived the experience of the success. It didn't happen. And so that is sort of to offer validation to what I'm going to say now. What I realize is that if RADA is in fact able to reduce, as I know it can, people's mortgages 30 to 50%, everybody wants that. And so what that means is, so I keep getting different figures. I heard that it's between 35 to 50 trillion. And other times I see that it's 100 trillion worth of real estate in the US and about the same in Europe, and about half that for the Asian democracies. So
how much mortgage rates, interest rates affect this concept?
Higher the interest rate, lower the greater the savings that we can offer, because it's the inverse. What the RADA mortgage does is the inverse of compound interest, which will make more sense when you see it.
Paper or anything like that? Have you done a website or anything to sink my teeth into?
No. So so here's the reason I'm trying to keep it the confidentiality. This is the reason I'm really happy to get to you versus having to take it to the public. And that is that if we issue a currency based upon 10 to 15% of this real estate, we will have by far the single greatest currency value.
So, what do you mean issue a?
So RADA, if we're going to be refinancing every home in America, which is what we're proposing, we can get the banks to consider that. To introduce this new RADA dollar, which is going to be against 15% of all real estate in the US, in Europe, and the Asian democracies. So I'll get into more detail. Let me ask you this. Do you have my number? Are you comfortable with calling me so we can talk in person?
Literally, it's like part of Connect, you have to talk on Connect, but I can give you my email because this is sort of the arrangement with Connect as a user and expert operator. Because Monex would go out of business if everybody started doing personal conversations. Yeah,
well, they charged me for 3 of the calls with you, so it's $600, and I've only talked to you once, so they can reimburse me. And they have
to reimburse you for that?
No, and the same thing with Tulsi, and then they charged me another 100. So I'm about $700 in for.
Send me an email, SOSCAST.
I'm sorry, I don't have a pen here. Can you message me with it?